Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. Time for another show. Was supposed to be time for Donald Trump's sentencing, but as you know, we've been counting down for a while towards that one, but we've also known for a while that it's been delayed again. And if you would, it didn't happen again today. It happened a couple, days, weeks ago. Delayed until after the election, as you know. And if you want to start another countdown with me, we're about 10 weeks from sentencing, but we have another hurdle in the way with that case. About 8 weeks from now, we first have a hearing. It'll be Tuesday, both of them on Tuesdays. November 12th, a hearing wherein Judge Merchan will be considering a Trump motion to dismiss the whole damn thing because SCOTUS immunity case, no indication so far that he'd be inclined to dismiss the whole thing as a result of that, but you never know, I guess. And then once we get past that, then we have sentencing on 2 weeks hence. So what does that make it? The 26th, November 26th. So around Thanksgiving, I guess, which would be something to be thankful for at that point. It's probably the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So we can all be happy and give thanks for him being sentenced to prison at that point. I hope that's the outcome, but it's perhaps too much to hope for. Sending prominent politicians and extraordinarily rich white people, even if they're orange, to prison is not something that happens very frequently in this country. So, it does happen from time to time, and there's room for it, but let's say I wouldn't hold my breath. But if it happens, terrific. Roast a turkey and enjoy it. Okay, what else is happening today? Well, a few things going on in the news. Around town here, that is to say, the United States of America. It's a very big town. Let's see. Kamala Harris had an interview with the National Association of Black Journalists, and it apparently went somewhat better than Donald Trump's. And I guess Jason Miller is over on the terrible place over on Twitter, wondering why that is. Like, I assume he's being sarcastic and tongue-in-cheek, but I guess, his hope is that your takeaway from that is, they were so biased against Donald Trump. I mean, he's trying to figure it out, like in his tongue-in-cheek line about it. I wonder what the difference was. Well, could have been that one person didn't go in as a combative a-hole. Could just have been that. But of course, I'm sure he's trying to play it as a race thing, even though he was painted up as an Oompa Loompa and went in there and then, of course, he fought with them, insulted them, and used the time to attack Kamala Harris and her racial background, which is just about, the perfect formula for being mutilated in there. So, anyway, that it didn't go the same way for Kamala Harris, and one might wonder why that is. If you don't know anything about the two of them, I guess that could be what you wonder about. Let's see. Other things from around the country, let's see. The racisms continue in Springfield, Ohio, and I guess they're getting set to, Trump plans a visit there at some point, and maybe even very soon. I put something away from Radley Balco and from Jamel Bowie, both on the subject, and I guess, Jamel Bowie's main theme here was that as he was sending this article around on Blue Sky saying Trump and the right-wingers are planning to do a Charlottesville to Springfield, gather there, march through there. The Nazis are already marching there, having a great time and bothering everybody, closing the schools, closing the administrative buildings and the hospitals, etc. Not like they need any of those things out there. But I guess they're going to call even more of them in to try and press the point even further. I was just sort of struck by the fact that, they're having to call in the troops. Everybody has to take the weekend and go to Springfield, Ohio to march there Charlottesville style because they couldn't generate a semi-organic Merseyside riot there. I think that was what they were hoping for in the beginning. And as it turns out, as Nazi magnified as the general area may be, because I don't think that there's a tremendous number of Nazis necessarily residing in Springfield. They may be from out of state as well in many cases, but it was apparently easy to draw them in and get them marching, but not actually easy to get, the majority of people into the streets and acting out violently, because it's actually kind of a normal place, and I guess the people there are fairly normal as well. And, there are as many victims outside among the general population in Springfield as there are among the Haitian community, and the Nazis and right-wingers have made certain of that by disrupting everyone's life and everyone's day by closing all these buildings with bomb threats. Still no condemnation of that for the most part from either of the Republican candidates. I think J.D. Vance gave a nod to that. Well, of course we oppose political violence, but I'm right about all of the things that I said that caused the political violence, about which he is actually wrong. So, a typical Republican situation. Greg Dworkin is here. He's done a bit of organizing of the news from, all over the place, has perhaps a better read on things. I only look at, hey, man, what's on my phone this morning? That's all I have time for before 9 o'clock. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good morning. So, I do have the list for you.
Yes.
But right before the list, before I told you that it was Wednesday, you already knew this.
No, well... Thank you.
There's a post just above that about my visitor. I hope you saw
visitor.
that.
Okay.
If not, you should take a look.
Well, I'm looking. It's a big X. Hi, X. How are you?
Yeah, well, click on it and see what happens.
That's a big hummingbird.
Yes, it's a very large hummingbird, very furry hummingbird.
Yes.
About the size of a garbage truck.
Yeah.
That the bear came to the deck last night.
How nice.
Heard some noise.
Yeah.
We have a door that leads out to the deck. And the top part of the door is a window. That's,
I see
easily picture that. And then there's a shade, just a pull shade up and down.
Mm-hmm.
So the shade was down. I heard a noise, and I opened the shade, and there's this bear looking at me. I mean, the face was pressed up to the door.
Yeah, he wanted to know if the show was starting.
So I'm looking at him. He's looking at me. He's about, the door is between us.
Yes.
But we're talking 12 inches.
Yeah.
And let me just tell you, those suckers are big.
I guess.
I closed the blind.
Large. Yeah.
Turned the lights
like a
off
cartoon.
And told the bear nobody's home.
Closing the blind. Wile E. Coyote is sort of
right.
thing.
I opened the blind, look at the bear, closed the blind.
Okay.
And, it's pretty frightening. And as somebody mentioned, as we were talking about this online, bears are like a combination of danger and doofus.
Yes.
Like they sort of ramble but they're really fast and they're incredibly strong. So the first thing it did, the thing I sent you was a little video of it taking down the hummingbird fever and licking it. Didn't break it at all. I mean, it's perfectly intact this morning. And then we have two hanging feeders, which are no longer hanging because we took them down. But the bear took the bear-proof one down. It really is a bear-proof feeder because all it did is lick some of the seed out. It didn't squeeze it like a toothpaste tube, which is what happened 5 years ago when we had a bear. This one was about twice the size of the one we had before.
Oh, yeah?
And it took the hanger that the feeder was on and basically twisted it like a pretzel because it could. I mean, there was no reason for it to. It just felt like it.
It was playing.
Yeah. And if the bear tells me that it's a hummingbird, then yes, sir, you are a hummingbird.
That's right. No, don't fight with the bear.
If you told me I was a hummingbird at that moment, I would say, yes, sir, I am a hummingbird.
Sure. Close the blinds and fly around the kitchen.
Right, if that's what you want me to do, as long as you don't come in the house.
Wild. Well, the bear went over the mountain to see what he could see.
The bear went over the mountain, over the fence.
And it was a hummingbird feeder is what he saw. And he ate it.
So, I mean, they're really cute and cuddly, but only when they're outside and you're inside.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they're out there.
Yep. That's the biggest bear I ever had on my back porch.
Well, congratulations. That is a tremendous accomplishment.
I put that aside and looked a little bit at politics.
All right.
And this morning's Pundit Roundup is entitled Using a Security Breach for Political Purposes. I've decided to call it a security breach because that's what it was. I'm not labeling it as an assassination attempt because he didn't get that far.
He didn't try hard enough. Well,
Guy's a nutcase. That story's already fading.
Yeah, well.
Other than Trump trying to keep it alive because he's trying to say that
doing.
Democrats are now no longer entitled to talk about how badly he's trying to wreck democracy and be a fascist, because that encourages people to try and shoot him. So only he is allowed to say that Kamala Harris is a communist and a fascist, but nobody's allowed to say anything bad about him, because those are the rules and he makes them. And frankly, nobody needs to pay any attention to that whatsoever. Ignore it. It's stupid. It comes across as stupid. It comes across as losing. It comes across as flailing. And that's what it is.
Yeah, all right. I can accept that. This incident hasn't apparently disturbed anyone, quite honestly, and even the Republicans
it was only
haven't.
A security breach.
Yeah, people with weapons are all over the place. Thanks actually to the people like
a guy with
Donald
a gun
Trump who gives
in Florida.
It to him. Yeah.
Okay,
what? No way. Yeah, that was barely permissible as a shoot for the Secret Service. Wait a minute, the guy is open carrying a long rifle. I thought that was okay. All right, he was brandishing it. He was pointing it at the president.
The Secret Service was standing its ground.
Yeah, right. Basically, it comes down to that. Okay, so yeah, I can see. I like the that's it, a security breach. That's all it really is. They never discuss it in terms of an assassination attempt, really. When a person, drives a truck through the barrier at the White House, they just say a crazy guy drove a truck into the fence and they arrest him.
Look, there are innumerable threats against Biden and Harris that simply go unmentioned and unreported, because what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So this really, to me, falls in that category. So moving on from that, Trump sees that doesn't work for him, because what he's really trying to do is get everybody to not pay attention to the fact that he's unpopular, he's losing, he lost the debate, he's behind the polls. So now he wants to change the subject and decides that the best way to do that is Haitians are eating cats in Springfield, Ohio. And even though that seems like news from the debate that only reminds people that he lost the debate, he's doing it anyway. And this is where that whole brilliant discussion, I think we talked about the other day with Josh Marshall about the two campaigns.
Yes.
The scare-quoted Trump campaign, which is to say Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles' campaign managers want him to talk about the border, and eating cats is not the border. They want to talk about immigration in a different way. Unfortunately for them, border crossing incidents are down to Trump-era levels at this point.
Yeah.
So there's not much to talk about. Well, they want to talk about inflation. Well, unfortunately for them, inflation is down to less than 3%. And in fact, today is the day at 2 p.m. that the Fed is going to tell us that they're cutting either 50 basis points, that is to say,
it's 0.5%.
0.5%. Or 0.25%, one of those two. And as one of the economists on Twitter said, I'm going to miss not being able to argue about whether it's 0.5 point or 0.25 point, because that was fun. And we won't be able to do that after today.
Why not? Go ahead. You could accuse the Fed of eating cats if you want.
Yeah, you could. In other words, all the economic news is good for Harris. I mentioned to you the other day, Mark Zandi, the economist, has a model that says that this is all good for Harris and moving in Harris's direction. I found this otherwise uncommented by me article from August as I was looking things up. I looked to see what Alan Abramowitz was saying this year. The model he has is called Time for a Change model.
Okay.
He put it out in August. It predicts a close election with a slight edge for Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. And he uses three things. The popularity of the incumbent.
Okay.
Which sort of you can use, sort of you can't use, but you could use, I don't know who to use. Do you use Biden or do you use Harris?
Well, what does he do in
because Harris is more
years?
popular than Biden. The second thing is the state of the economy, which basically is good for Harris and getting better, and the number of terms that the president's parties control the White House, which in this case is one. So you build on that, and this year's version of the model, he says, shows Kamala Harris as a narrow favorite. And it's only gotten better for her because the economy's gotten better and her popularity has grown. But she is in such a weird position in a good way in that she's, as a politician, masterfully straddling the change candidate versus the incumbent, trying to take advantage of whatever's good for the incumbent, but also trying to take advantage of whatever's good for a change candidate.
Okay.
And she's, look, inflation is down. That's great. Oil drilling is up, and that's good for the American economy. We'll skip the, save the earth stuff for after the election. Last night, Trump was at a town hall in Michigan. I call it a town hall because he actually took a couple of questions from the audience and talked about how important it is that he's president because you have to go back to Alaska and you have to drill in Bagram.
Okay. What? Where?
Yeah, exactly. And he said it 5 times, so it wasn't just one mistake. It was his delusion. He meant Anwar and didn't even come close to it. So, so again, as an incumbent, she gets to claim that, she gets credit for that. But as a change candidate, she gets to say, and whatever it is you don't like about that, I'm the change candidate, so vote for me. And really, it's a wonderful strategy. It's the next best thing to the tabula rasa whiteboard where people don't know you, and so whatever it is they want, they put that on you. Obama ran his first term, as that candidate, and it worked beautifully. In a way, Trump used that his first term, and it worked beautifully. Once you're known, you can't do that. Harris still has the ability to do that. So all of that is good. We look now at The Economist, who has their own model, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump neck and neck. But they figure Kamala Harris has a 3 in 5 chance of winning. That's 60%. Donald Trump 40%. And figure right now the way things look, she's got 279 electoral votes, and they put who's ahead in the national polls. They give her a 4-point lead.
Okay.
Now the current thinking is different than 2016. Everybody knows there's an electoral college advantage for Republicans, but what that translates in real life terms is that back in 2016, basically a Democrat had to win by about 4 points to be confident that they were going to win the election.
Yes.
Now it's about 2.5 points.
Okay.
A 2.5 point lead, according to 538, gives you a 50-50 chance of winning the swing states.
Okay.
That means anything better than 2.5 points is in Harris's favor. Once you get to be 8 points, you win. If that's your prediction, because it's twice the margin of error. Remember, margin of error, we're not using it this year, but that's really how that works. So right now, The Economist gives her a 4-point lead. 538 gives her a 2.9 lead, a 2.9 point lead.
2.9 points lead. Okay.
2.9 ahead. And so that's basically in her favor. And that's why, of course, Nate Silver's behind a paywall, and I'm not paying for it, prediction says that's why Trump has a 60% chance of winning.
Yeah, he'll only gamble it away anyway. You don't want to give him that money.
He's got a broken model. He gives Atlas Intel the only poll nationally that gives Trump the lead, the most important position in figuring out what's going on. And his model is based on fundamentals, which is Biden's unpopularity. And that's why I wanted to throw in the Abramowitz.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Because that's also fundamentals, but it doesn't say the same thing. So I think Nate's model is broken. And it doesn't matter how far Harris is ahead. Nate keeps writing, well, this was a good day for Harris. Well, this is the best day for Harris so far. This, that, and everything else.
Well, I don't even know if he has an interest in having a working model anymore if he's not really in the elections game the way he once was. I mean, he's still interested, but having a broken model is something I guess you can survive if you switch jobs.
I guess. So in any case,
all right.
I'm just trying to give you a sense of where we're at this morning. I think that the basis point drop in interest rates is only going to help Harris, of course. Let's go back to 538's own model here. President, general election, states, national. We see Harris with 48.3, Trump 45.3. When I say that Trump's been stuck at 44 to 45, this is what I mean. it's not that individual polls don't show him higher. It's that the average, the aggregates, really showing him not able to get above 45. And that, all of that discussion about Abramowitz's model and The Economist and how they track it, you could look at 270 to win. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different models out there, split ticket. They all generally give Harris a range of a lead between 2.5 and 4. Right. And that's enough to put her ahead. And, that's why, given the fact that she's ahead, having Trump decide and Vance decide to go all in, and I know I lied about telling you about cats and dogs. Everybody knows we're lying, but we're going to do it anyway. And as you said, we'll even go so far as to maybe organize something in Springfield, Ohio, to belabor the point. When you're behind, and this is hurting you.
Behind, yes.
And reminding everybody that you brought this up at the debate that you lost. It's dumb.
Yes.
And that's why the other half of the Trump campaign, the Lasivita Wiles part, says, why are you doing this? And Trump says, because my instincts tell me it's the best thing to do, because this puts me in the news, and the more I say it, the more they talk about me, and that's all I really care about. I want them to talk about me. I'm not talking strategy here. I don't have a strategy. My strategy is to get them to talk about me every day between now and the election. This is the best way for me to do it.
Yeah, that's always kind of in his MO, and it's bankrupted him 6 times, so come on. I don't know whether this is supposed to be lucky number 7 or
right, so
he
this
just figures
leads me,
there's nothing.
And by the way, this may be a relatively short segment today. I don't know if I have a whole lot beyond this.
They're
but
not even mowing the lawn
This is what's
yet.
going on.
Okay.
So the message box, Dan Pfeiffer. Are Trump's racist lies about pet-eating migrants helping his campaign? Well, he acknowledges this is what Trump wants. Donald Trump needs attention to fill the bottomless pit in his soul. He has always been this way. It's why he spent so much time vying for the attention of New York tabloids. In addition to addressing his tremendous insecurities, Trump views attention as power. The fact that Trump fell out of the headlines after his first assassination attempt in the GOP convention was driving him nuts.
Yes.
He played all his old hits. They didn't work. His rhetoric on the stump and on Truth Social became more and more unhinged. When Trump returned to Twitter, the posts on his Ponzi scheme of a failing social media site were not garnering attention. And then while the Springfield claims have been repeatedly refuted, Trump and his allies have doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down on the Haitian migrants eating pets myth. He threatened to deport the migrants and plans to make a campaign stop in Springfield. Trump wants the spotlight back. He certainly has it. Is it helping his campaign? And Pfeiffer goes on to write, I know we all have broken brains from the repeated traumas of the Trump era, but border security and Trump screaming about mythical pet eating are not the same thing. The Washington Post's Aaron Blake points out that according to YouGov polling, the majority of Trump supporters believe the false claims, but independents disbelieve them 51 to 24. 5 times as many independents believe the claims are definitely false and definitely true. And there's another piece of evidence to debunk the theory. As Nate Silver points out, post-debate polling indicates a surge for Kamala Harris. That's why his model has Trump having a better chance of winning every day.
Okay.
I added that last part because it's stupid and it makes no sense, but that's Nate Silver's model.
Yes, well, Nate Silver probably also thinks Bagram might be in Alaska.
Well, I'm not arguing,
says
Dan Pfeiffer, that the surge is due to the focus on Springfield, Ohio. I think it is because it focuses on the debate. But it's also clear that Trump is not doing anything to stop Harris's momentum coming out of the debate. And then he goes on to say what Kamala Harris really needs to do is make the focus about herself. That's not how it works. That's not how media works. You can tell that. Kamala Harris had a 90-minute session, which was really good, back and forth at the National Association of Black Journalists yesterday. I watched the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
There were some great questions. There were some great answers.
I can imagine that one.
Right?
All right. I should have seen that one. I don't think I even knew it was happening.
It was at 2:30 in the afternoon, and
no wonder.
It was on YouTube.
It
wasn't on the stations.
Busy refuting things elsewhere. Yeah. Okay.
So you had to go out of your way to try to find it, but I did, and I watched it because, like, when you're retired, you can do stuff like that.
Yeah. Nice. Okay.
Okay. And the thing is that all of this was accompanied by people like Josh Kraushaar saying, people are complaining that Harris just isn't meeting with the media. She's not talking. I mean, Biden wasn't very good at meeting at the media, and he was far more accessible than Harris is. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, basically what you're saying is that she's not meeting with white middle-class journalists.
I guess. I mean,
because she's doing this. It was 90 minutes, and she's doing, Spanish language stuff.
Whole room full of journalists.
And she's doing local stuff. And when you say that she's not available, and she's much less available than Biden, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's simply it counts only if it's national, I guess, to the national reporters. But I mean, speaking to local reporters, that's like retail politics, Iowa style. They love it, I guess, if it's being done in Iowa. But if it's not, somehow it's horrific. I don't know. I don't think so. Well, I don't agree, and I'm probably not surprising anybody with that. Okay. Well, I understand. It sounds like the lawn care crew has arrived. So,
well, it's Wednesday.
They're in the distance, right? I know you can set
they'll get closer to the house.
Calendar, I guess.
I'll go out and tell them about the bear.
Okay. Yes. Right.
That's what we do in the town. Everybody knows everybody else, and you share this stuff. Oh yeah, my sister-in-law had that at two streets down. And,
I see. Not not like the bear might still be around, watch out kind of thing, or just, hey, guess what happened?
Yeah, well, just everybody needs to know, because if you are foolish enough like me to have feeders out, it's time to bring them in.
Yeah, so okay.
They're in the neighborhood.
Everyone will go
bears
into it.
range widely, and they can go a lot of miles in a day, so the bear's far away now.
Yes.
It's just that they come back if they think that you're going to put the feeder out there all the time for them.
Yeah, or a picnic basket. Don't do that.
Yeah, so no picnic baskets till November.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And guess what? It's only the Kagro in the Morning Show this morning, at least from this point on. Greg has wrapped it up, and there just, I guess, wasn't a huge number of stories that he was prepared to get to today. And, of course, the lawn care crew is there, and it was only making things worse as the commercial break went on. It became clearer that I guess the grass is very, very high right next to his window, and they really have to spend an awful lot of time working on that. So, all right, keeping things fresh for tomorrow, I guess. So we'll have much more to discuss with him. And then we'll wish we had that half an hour back tomorrow, I'm sure. But okay, lots of things to get to, including, as I mentioned, the developments in thinking around the Springfield, Ohio stuff. They must really be just grieving in Springfield to see that this is how they finally sort of make the news nationally. I guess they, another one of those small towns that thought this sort of thing never happens here. But two interesting articles out today that add some perspective to it. One from Jamel Bowie, which I mentioned, and one from Radley Balco, the first half of which I think succinctly runs through a number of the problems with the accusations that are being made. And I'm, at the level that we've talked about before, like, how do you even get to a place where you believe that somebody thinks they see their pet cat being butchered, like literally butchered, and doesn't call the police or say anything to the people who are doing it. I could see where he might think that they were dangerous or something but instead of talking to the police, goes to Facebook, but doesn't really go to Facebook, tells a friend who tells a friend who tells a friend who tells an acquaintance who tells a cousin who goes to Facebook. None of it stands to reason in much the same way that, I don't know, for some reason I was immediately reminded of this. Yesterday, was it New York Times, put out another of the episodes of their ongoing undecided voter panel, young voter panel, and in reminding everybody what the profile of the people involved in the panel actually were, the profiles of the people were, it generated a bit of discussion yesterday afternoon, as everybody points out. There is a 23 or so year old woman who claims, not to have, to have voted for Biden in the 2020 election, but to be an independent and undecided voter, and apparently goes on at some length about how she blames Democrats and progressives in particular for the acrimonious atmosphere of American politics, which is amazing, and saying it's their fault because they treated, everyone remembers how they treated Mitt Romney and John McCain so horribly, and so the Republicans had no choice but to push back. And of course, then people pointing out she was like 2 years old, when any of this stuff happened. If she's 23 now, how old was she when John McCain was running for president? When Romney was running for president? To claim to have specific memories of how poorly they were treated, which are, of course, one, wrong, and two, much older memories than she's likely to actually have, suggests that she got her information from somewhere else, for one thing, and maybe isn't all that independent-minded or undecided, for that matter. But just interesting. But similarly, the information about what's going on in Springfield, it just sort of seems like I don't understand where they're getting these people who, say they believe these things about what's happening in Springfield. It just seems contrived at the very least. Anyway, that's not really the point of what Jamel Bowie and Radley Balco are talking about. Bowie begins this way under the headline of "What happens in Springfield won't stay in Springfield." That is also a salient point. This sort of targeting of vulnerable populations. There's no real reason to believe it would stay localized in Springfield, not just because there are Haitian Americans all over the place that could be targeted. And by the way, some hundreds of thousands of them in Florida, who many of them are fully American citizens and ready to vote, and will be taking this personally in Florida's not a swing state, but I don't know. I think a lot more Haitian Americans might be motivated to come out and cast a ballot this time, where they might previously have thought, nothing's going to make a difference here in Florida, and I'm working. I can't get free to go stand in line. My precinct is going to have a line 6 hours long on purpose. I can't put my time in on that. But now they may very well want to do something like that. And we got to check in with Darwin too, who I imagine, I don't know. It's hard to read sometimes how Darwin will be taking this. On one hand, we could easily imagine he's incandescent with rage and waiting to perhaps calm down, or trying to catch it all on tape for dramatic effect. Or, he's kind of a stoic guy too, and he could very well be taking this in stride in the sense that Republican racists are going to racist. That's what they do. Of course, they're going to target Haitians. They check all the boxes for American conservative racism. And we're going to do what we got to do and motivate who we can motivate to come out and vote to show strong numbers. But comment on it, maybe not. I don't know. We'll have to see. And then, of course, there's also the possibility of, I want very badly to record a segment reacting to this, but I am a very busy person, and I am living my life. And I also know how I'm going to vote. It's not like I'm an undecided voter. Anyway, the point is that it's not going to be limited at all, and there's no reason to believe it would be limited to Haitian Americans, anybody that they can point to and say, not us. They will be taking the chance to do that too. And let's see where Jamel Bowie goes with this. He writes, where once Donald Trump attracted only the right-wing fringe of American politics, now he leads it. Where once he kept some distance from agitators and provocateurs like Laura Loomer, now they're at the center of his campaign. And where he once merely inspired extremists to act, he now points them directly at the object of his rage. That is a big point and a big problem. Take, of course, Springfield, Ohio, where schools, colleges, and municipal buildings and hospitals and other things have been shut down and community events canceled owing to bomb threats targeting the city's Haitian community. Those threats come as Trump and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, smear the Haitians of Springfield, Ohio, with the lie that they're stealing and eating the pets of presumably native-born Americans. They, I'm sure, would not be concerned with stealing and eating the pets of immigrant Americans. No. Vance, who was ostensibly elected to represent and aid the people of towns like Springfield, has been even more vicious than his boss, spreading the additional lie that Haitians have carried disease and disorder to Ohio. It's hard for me to believe that anybody was more vicious than Trump about it, because Trump has been incredible about it, just, well, I guess in the literal sense, but, I mean, just really outrageous in that, well, he confuses all sorts of things all the time. Now, I was just wondering, by the way, I should have asked Greg what he thought about this. The idea of his, this has nothing to do with Ohio, except for the point that he's generally muddled and confused about everything. The idea of him thinking that Bagram was the name of a place in Alaska, when it is, of course, the name of an Air Force base in Afghanistan. Now, both begin with A, but that's where the similarity ends, I think. I mean, they're both mountainous. There is that. They have their mountainous regions. But other than that, I don't think there's much reason. But I was kind of wondering whether in his wackadoodle head, he was like, oh yeah, we want to drill in the Alaskan Wildlife Nature Reserve. Anwar, right? Anwar Sadat, Egypt, Middle East, not Middle East, Afghanistan, but Central Asia, but something, everybody's brown, it's very hot and dry, and we're engaged in forever wars there. So therefore, same thing, Anwar Bagram, I don't know. Do you think it was something like that? I have no idea really how to trace the origin of that particular mistake. But what he's been doing on Springfield, Ohio, as reprehensible as what Vance is doing has been, and Vance, too, has sort of kicked the can forward by saying, well, now they're carrying disease and disorder as well as eating people's pets. Remember, the accusation is stealing and eating pets, and I guess also stealing and eating the park animals, the geese and ducks, which, if they're Canada geese, and I don't mean to denigrate Canada here, but Canada geese, previously known in this country as Canadian geese, but I guess they're not necessarily Canadian nationals, and so we can now call them Canada geese. Canada geese considered something of a pest down here, and people probably want them gone, and they might be doing a service if they were eliminating some of the Canada geese, although some people think that they are noble and majestic and wonderful looking, and as long as they're crapping on other people's lawns, I guess. Anyway, Trump blew right past that and conflated the two racist lies that he's telling about two different towns, the other one being Aurora, Colorado, where the rumor that he's turned into a presidential platform claim is that the Venezuelan gangs had taken over an apartment complex, which also was not true. But he conflated the two and then went further. Oh, well, okay, gang members, well, they're criminals and they do all the bad stuff. They do the murders and the robbing and the raping. So, therefore, he conflates it with what's going on in Springfield, and he started telling the press when they asked him about why are you saying these things about Springfield. He says the Haitians in Springfield, the immigrants there they're murdering and they're raping and they're molesting the children and all of these crazy things. Everything always devolves to like kidnapping and sex trafficking with him. You remember when he was talking about migrants, when they thought migrants and caravans worked and would scare people. The big threat was, well, there's a big caravan of them coming and we have vague and unspecified worries about that because they're different from us. And he went straight to, because they're murdering people and killing everybody and bringing the drugs. And he just blew right past. Well, I guess they would consider that saying the quiet part out loud, except the quiet part was never true. So I don't know, but he's doing the same thing with Springfield, Ohio, and conflating it with either with Aurora or just saying, well, people aren't getting angry enough about the pet thing, so I'll just say it's rape and murder and sex trafficking and they're abusing the children. And I haven't seen anybody actually commenting on that at this point. That is not even what the rumors were, and the rumors were wrong. And all of this started, as I understand it, over or at least the big confrontation that has now come to a head was over the incident in which a Haitian driver had a traffic accident with a school bus, in which the school bus, rolled over and a student was killed. This was a traffic accident, not a murder, not an abduction, nothing like that. And Donald Trump has taken the traffic accident and turned it into, okay, well, the pets thing, okay, that's not making people angry enough. They're only bomb threats. We want to see some actual bombs. Okay, sure. So then in that case, we'll just say that the Haitians are murdering everybody and stealing children for sex trafficking. And that's not even alleged anywhere. But Donald Trump is freely saying it, and nobody says the old man has lost it. Nobody will just print that. All right. Well, that was a little bit of an aside. Why don't we talk to Jamel Bowie again? By which I mean letting him reading his organized thoughts about this instead of my 2 hours of rambling like Donald Trump. So where were we? Oh, yes, right. Vance, he said, had been even more vicious than his boss. I don't even know. I question that call, but it doesn't matter for our purposes. Despite pleas from both the Republican mayor of Springfield and the Republican governor of Ohio, who called the story of the attacks on pets, quote, a piece of garbage that was simply not true, and lots of people had fun thinking that he was calling Trump a piece of garbage. That is true, but I don't think that's what he was saying. Neither Trump nor Vance is willing to end the rhetorical assault on the city's Haitian immigrants. If anything, they're unapologetic. That pretty much sums it up. By the way, on Blue Sky, just in the last hour or so, I see Paul Waldman noting that there is a Wall Street Journal article discussing this very thing, saying that a staffer for J.D. Vance called the Springfield city manager to find out if the pet eating rumors were true. He was told no, but guess what? Vance and the campaign went ahead with pushing the bogus story anyway. I am not a subscriber to the Wall Street Journal, but you might be, and you might be interested in reading that article. I will include Waldman's, what's his name? Waldman? Yeah, I think I've heard of that. His post and the link to the Wall Street Journal article, and good luck reading it. Or perhaps you'll want to, I don't know, will you be moved to subscribe to this Rupert Murdoch property? I hope not. Anyway, back to Jamel one more time here. During a rally in Tucson, Arizona on Thursday, for example, remember the example being of them being unapologetic about what's going on and what they're doing, Trump expanded the lie even further. Wow, let's see. 20,000 illegal Haitian immigrants have descended on a town of 58,000 people, destroying their way of life, Trump said. Residents are reporting that the migrants are walking off with the town's geese, and they're not even the town's geese. They're taking the geese. You know where the geese are? In the park. And even walking off with their pets. He got lost. He forgot that he was supposed to be doing it about pets. Hung up on the geese. When asked about the bomb threats, he dodged the question. I don't know what happened with the bomb threats, Trump said. I don't know. I do know, he says, I don't know what happened with the bomb threats. I know that it's been taken over by illegal migrants, and that's a terrible thing that happened. Springfield was this beautiful town, and now they're going through hell. The hell, of course, is of his own making. As for Vance, who spearheaded this smear campaign, when he amplified the claim on social media, he confessed to elevating rumors and lies to prove a political point. The quote, of course, being, if I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do. Uh-oh. A more self-aware person would see that, quote, the suffering of the American people, unquote, includes all of the people of Springfield who are facing the ugly consequences of Trump's decision to make them a prop for his campaign. To him, their day-to-day lives are worth less than their symbolic value, and this is why Trump wants to visit. It's his chance to fan the flames as well as fuel the fire for his own purposes. It must suck to turn out to have been a prop all along and to be forsaken by him, but people are slowly coming to that conclusion. And, of course, we've been telling you for a long time, ETTD, everything Trump touches dies. Don't let him come to town. Plus, he's going to stiff you for the security as well. He's not going to pay for all the overtime for all the cops who are going to have to be patrolling in case there's a third assassination attempt at some point, or a second one, depending on how you classify these things. And he's going to leave you impoverished and in debt as well. Now, there's something familiar, Bowie continues, in the spectacle of a caravan. I see what you did there. A caravan of far-right agitators descending on a small city to weaponize the tensions that surround inclusion, belonging, and identity. 7 years ago, a group of white supremacists marched through Charlottesville, Virginia, under the banner of Unite the Right. On their first night, they, of course, held a torchlight rally on the front steps of the rotunda at the University of Virginia, where they chanted slogans such as, "You will not replace us," and some other ones you might remember. The next day, an even larger group of white supremacists and neo-Nazis rioted throughout the city's downtown. One of them drove a Dodge Challenger through a group of counter-protesters, killing a young activist, Heather Heyer, and injuring several other demonstrators. In the wake of the attacks of Charlottesville, Trump gave 3 separate sets of remarks. In the first, he criticized, quote, this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides, a formulation that earned the scorn of Democrats and Republicans alike, who condemned it as an equivocating attempt to avoid the reality that the hatred, bigotry, and violence on display in Charlottesville was perpetrated by one side, and one side only. Facing up, I guess, to this backlash, Trump gave another set of remarks in which he condemned the Unite the Right marchers. He followed up with an impromptu news conference at Trump Tower where he made his infamous claims that there were, quote, very fine people, unquote, on both sides of the incident. The incident? The murder, you mean? Although Trump now insists that he did nothing wrong with regard to the march and the violence, it was clear at the time that his response was an abdication of presidential duty. These people love me. These are my people, Trump said in a phone call to Paul Ryan after his initial remarks. I can't backstab the people who support me. In spite of Trump's own words, you could, if you were feeling generous, make some distinction at the time between the former president and those who marched on Charlottesville. Trump did not publicly claim them, nor did he adopt their rhetoric, even if the connection between his rise and their boldness was clear and unmistakable. By the way, as I was reading through this, I can't backstab the people who support me. Consider that on the Democratic side, it's considered like really super savvy politics. Go generate a sister soldier moment, as we now call essentially the move in which somebody does in fact backstab people who support you. Anyway, today, if you were to place the rhetoric of Unite the Right side by side with that of the Trump 2024 campaign, I guess, you would struggle to find a difference. Echoing the chants of blood and soil we heard in Charlottesville, the former president now tells audiences that immigrants are, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. He calls his foes vermin and warns that the threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within. Someone wrote that for him. The reason Unite the Right marchers were screaming the slogan, "You will not replace us," and intermittently, "Jews will not replace us," was their devotion to the idea of the so-called Great Replacement, the once fringe conspiracy theory that liberals and their allies are importing immigrants into the United States to replace the white population. Now, something like this is part of the Republican mainstream. Vance told Ohio voters 2 years ago during his campaign for Senate, he's only been in the Senate for 2 years, less, remember that President Biden had opened the border, quote, with more illegal drugs and more Democrat voters pouring into this country, unquote. His tirades against Haitian immigrants are simply more of the same. For the Trump campaign to descend on Springfield would be to recapitulate the dynamic that led to the events in Charlottesville. The difference, of course, is that then Trump was several places removed from the extremists who led the effort to unite the right, and now he's the standard bearer. It is important to say that if presidential campaigns are a glimpse into presidential governance, then the Trump campaign's anti-Haitian agitation is a clear glimpse into how President Trump would behave and govern in a second term. One can imagine Trump spreading Springfield-esque lies from the Oval Office directly to the American public, where they come across. Remember, you're speaking to hundreds of thousands and perhaps millions and millions of people who proudly tell places like the New York Times, I don't pay attention to politics. I don't know anything about it. I'm an undecided voter, even right in the midst of the campaign. I have to be persuaded. And those are the sorts of people who are likely to say things like, hey, I don't know if I would ordinarily believe these fantastical rumors about pet eating, but when the president of the United States says it from the Oval Office, you got to take it seriously. Like, there are people who believe that, not even just always non-politics enjoyers, but lots of people who give extra credence to something that's said by that person in that manner, even though Trump is specifically lying from the Oval Office in the hopes that you will believe his lies. He knows very well he's going to weaponize that office. Anyway, let's see. One can imagine, of course, a Vice President Vance touring cities with new immigrant populations, attacking them with the same smears that he's used to target the Haitian community of Springfield, spreading hate so that the public will accept the mass deportation of millions of immigrants. Trump, in fact, has already promised to start mass deportations in Springfield. We're going to have the largest deportation in the history of our country, Trump said on Friday. And we're going to start with Springfield and, of course, the place he conflated it with, Aurora, because why not? Those are exactly the places. By the way, I did see somebody yesterday bring up, I guess, an old comment of Vance's back, I guess, in between the period in which he was the hillbilly elegy guy and then became a Trumper, when he was still anti-Trump, essentially. And it was, he was saying basically the idea of, even then, the Trumpers were floating mass deportation ideas. And he was saying, you mean to tell me that the same federal government that can barely, coordinate taxing people correctly or keeping them in line over various things or keeping them in compliance with various laws and regulations is going to somehow figure out how to deport 11, 12, 15 million people efficiently? Of course not. And then everyone's sort of laughing out loud that he once said that and now has switched sides. But for the fact that, it worries me that, they may very well quickly find, oh, no, we're not actually competent to safely round them all up and deport them out of the country. We'll do it unsafely, or we'll murder a large number or a percentage of them, or watch them die in our relocation camps before we ever get to deporting them, and create a human, a human rights crisis in and around this whole effort, and not care particularly about it either. All right. before we get to our break, a little bit more from Jamel Bowie here. Trump did not have a successful presidency. He failed to manage the pandemic. His permissive attitudes towards authoritarian regimes emboldened figures like Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban. His appointments to the federal judiciary left the basic rights of millions of people in shambles. His contempt for ordinary decency coarsened and corroded American civil life. He left both the nation and the world in worse shape, but for all his failures as chief executive, Trump was an able rabble-rouser. He has a genuine talent for exploiting the worst passions of ordinary people, and Vance, his junior partner in that regard, appears to be a quick study. I have little doubt that, given real power, Trump and Vance will fail as leaders, but that doesn't mean they won't succeed as demagogues. So, yes, you have that. That's, I guess, a toned-down version of, well, no, they're not competent to actually pull off a mass deportation, but they might still consider it a success if it devolves into some sort of humanitarian crisis. I said human rights crisis, but similar. Humanitarian crisis or mass murder. I don't think that would bother either of them, of course, until, another assassination attempt, perhaps one that was likewise better organized. I don't know. Don't know what it will take to, change their thinking on it, if anything is possible. All right. There was another piece left in pocket, as I mentioned. We'll get to that after the break. That one from Radley Balco. What J.D. Vance and Donald Trump don't want you to know about Springfield. I always love those constructions, although this one at least is what they don't want you to know, not what you don't know or everything you need to know or what you might not know. Not quite the same. It's evocative of it. But actually, the first half of this article, it's well done from what I've been able to skim from it. Nothing wrong with it. But it is a recounting of all the reasons why what Trump and Vance are doing is, one, reprehensible, and two, factually wrong. And he does acknowledge at some point in the article it's almost not worth, debunking and going over it point by point because it's so ridiculous. But he then gets around to another part here. It's represented in the subheader. What is it? What do J.D. Vance and Donald Trump not want you to know about Springfield? The answer here is immigrants are making red America great again. And yet, these are the people they're targeting because, of course, they want white people to make it great again, and they don't believe it can be great unless white people do it. That's a problem. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a brief break to gather our wits about us. But now, the Radley Balco article, What J.D. Vance and Donald Trump Don't Want You to Know About Springfield, but which you might already know. But actually, this is, as I said, the second half of the article has the point that is new and different from his roundup of the problems with what Trump and Vance are doing. And this one is illustrated with a picture I've seen a lot of recently. First of all, interesting that Trump and Vance are dressed identically. Vance has gone out and gotten himself a blue suit and red tie. And he may already have had that before the campaign began because he was clearly trying to get this VP nomination for a long time. But it's interesting to see them side by side like that. But Trump also, with the very evocative, I don't know what you would call this, like mugging for the camera in the way that Mussolini did. That very famous scowl, that, impish almost scowl that he puts on when he's busy absorbing admiration from the crowd. I think you know it. Anyway, Balco goes through a very, a comprehensive and quite correct compilation of all of the things that are wrong with what Trump and Vance and MAGA and Nazis are doing in Springfield, including, good lines here, saying the MAGA right is reveling in a giddy frenzy of unabashed racism. An army of right-wing chuds and influencers have descended upon Springfield, combing the city in a desperate search for evidence that some immigrant might once have eaten something unseemly. Meanwhile, the New York Post is now publishing articles about fender benders in which no one was harmed in a city 600 miles away because the drivers happened to be Haitian. I think that's a reference to trying to find more cases like the one that was said to be at the center of the latest, tensions, the accident in which someone, in fact, was harmed, a school child killed in an accident with a school bus, but they're trying to find yet more of it. There's also mention here of professional bigot Chris Rufo actually injected himself into this, offering a $5,000 bounty to anyone who could produce, quote, proof to back up Vance's racist pet-eating claims. It wasn't clear to me, by the way, when he did that, as beholden as Chris Rufo is to Ron DeSantis, who I imagine, probably ironically in trying to make himself more Trump-like, is busying himself with trying to sustain anger and resentment at Donald Trump, but without running afoul of MAGA troops somehow. Not working very well, but for having targeted him and forced him, to knuckle under and get out of the primary. I'm not sure. I'm not certain what the relationship between Rufo and DeSantis really is. He must be beholden to him for putting him in his new position from which he draws a salary, even though he never enters the state of Florida. And that's a good thing, but he's also probably, perfectly capable of backstabbing him in favor of Trump if he thinks, if he thinks Trump is going to win the presidency, he'll become a Trump guy just as quickly as he became a DeSantis guy when it looked like there was an advantage in it for him. But he, in offering this bounty, I couldn't quite tell whether he expected to pay it, because of course there would be evidence and I want to help out in finding the evidence, or was he saying, no, these guys are buffoons, the real smart people are here in Florida with the DeSantis gang, and these guys are lying, and I can prove it by putting up a $5,000 bounty and not seeing anyone able to claim it. But apparently he did then manage to scrounge a single grainy video, as Balco describes it, supposedly depicting immigrants, quote, barbecuing cats, unquote, except the alleged immigrants are apparently from the Congo, not Haiti. The video was shot in Dayton, not Springfield, and the meat was probably chicken, which would really kind of defeat the whole purpose. It, too, has been disputed by local police. And, yes, also understand that there is also video circulating in which people who are cooking a lamb were accused of cooking a cat, even though the two animals are of different size. And arguably, the barbecuing of lamb, a much more, let's say, routine operation than the barbecuing of cats. Lamb is a very popular consumable meat here in the United States and around the world. Barbecuing it or roasting it on a spit, although not a frequent feature of an all-American heartland white person barbecue. Perhaps a little bit more ethnic, or perhaps you've seen, My Big Fat Greek Wedding or something like that. Or you've been lately to Costco, where you can in fact find whole lambs in the freezer section for the various ethnic group consumers who want the whole thing. But yeah, I guess, I'm stammering over the idiocy of this whole thing, but I'm just thinking about the white heartland Americans who would point to that and say, what kind of barbarian roasts a whole animal on a spit, and then happily go to a pig pull where they're roasting an entire pig on a spit, or an ox. I've seen, entire steers. This is a huge, undertaking that happens all the time across certain portions of the South in particular, and it's ridiculous to say, well, but this time it's a lamb and so therefore barbaric. Anyway, that's what's going on, and that's what he's running through in the first half of this article, as I said, and then of course pointing out, but hey, for their purposes, Congolese people are black and speak funny, and that's good enough. So Vance declared victory. On with the pogrom. Now, then The problem with it, of course, being the campaign has now inflicted harm on the entire town, even the white people. Bomb threats, of course, as we've mentioned, shut down Springfield schools for the last 4 days. Wittenberg University canceled events and hired extra security after a shooting threat that specifically mentioned Haitians. Threats also forced 3 city hospitals into lockdown. The one thing that is true here, tension between immigrants and some longtime residents of Springfield has been simmering for a couple of years. They boiled over last year after a Haitian man caused a roadway collision that killed a young boy. Contrary to what Vance and others have claimed, this wasn't a murder. This is something they've set the stage for a long time with the, what do they call them? The angel parents, right? Is that the group? Or how they refer to them. But this was a feature of Trump's campaign in 2016 and 2020, campaigning on say aloud the names of good, honest Americans who've been murdered by people who are in this country illegally, migrants. And, they would feature them they brought them to the Republican conventions, to the State of the Union addresses that he gave. They featured prominently in lots of Republican rhetoric, and they figured they'd just reproduce that play here, except it was, it wasn't quite working because the people in the area actually knew very well that there was no murder here. As tragic as it was an accident. You could lay the blame on the person who did it, but certainly not the community that the person belonged to. At least that's not the usual American way. But anyway, as I said, tensions boiled over when this happened. A Haitian man driving a van crossed the median and into the path of an oncoming school bus. The bus swerved to miss the van and plunged into a ditch. A boy on the bus was ejected and killed when the bus landed on top of him. Tragically enough, the Haitian driver was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. They couldn't even pin it on that. His attorney has said he crossed the median after he was blinded by the sun. And I mean, the sun is the sun. That happens to a lot of people. Can't blame it on drugs. Can't blame it on degeneracy. But they can, I guess, point to the fact that the man had a Mexican driver's license, but not an Ohio license, so he wasn't legally permitted to drive. Legally permitted in this country. An illegal immigrant. No, not illegal. Well, his license was questionable. That doesn't really sound like much, even to the MAGA crowd. And then, of course, the man was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and received an unusually harsh sentence of 9 to 13 years in prison. And remember, this is Radley Balco talking. He knows about this stuff. Importantly, the boy's parents have repeatedly pleaded with politicians, pundits, and Springfield residents to stop using their son's death to stoke anti-immigrant sentiment. But instead, Vance has put this family on blast. Still, the boy's death inflamed the existing tension. City council meetings erupted in anger, including furious, often racist rants against the immigrants. And of course, as you know, from the fallout of the first Trump administration and the backlash that led to the rise of Glenn Youngkin and was credited to Chris Rufo, whose reward became running the universities, or at least the new college in Florida, now ensconced there as a DeSantis guy, still trying to inject himself into the conversation. But that all gave, when I say it gave rise to all of this, that gave rise to right-wing weirdos and people who weren't previously right-wing weirdos using the permission structure of having right-wing weirdos and Proud Boys and violent extremists show up at not student council, but at parent-teacher organization, PTO here, or PTA, perhaps parent-teacher association in other places, and school board meetings, and finding that we found ourselves then very quickly in a situation where school board members were being threatened with death. And people thinking of running for school board and people thinking of administering the elections in which school board members would be elected were finding that they were the subject of death threats. It all went crazy all at once, and they used the same playbook here in Springfield. Something has happened, they're angry about it, and violent threats ensue as part, injected directly into the middle of what was supposed to be the civic discourse at council meetings. Now back to the prepared thoughts here. Springfield now had all the necessary ingredients for a racial backlash. Start with a region facing economic hardship. Everyone remembers that, right? Wasn't that supposed to be the real reason for all of this? And all the pathologies that come with that. Add an infusion of immigrants and the resulting logistical difficulties accommodating them, then tie it all together with an incident easily distorted to capture all of the anger and fear in one tiny anecdote. All that was missing was some baiting by white supremacist groups and a politician shameless enough to exploit it all for political gain. On cue, a Nazi group in the area took notice and held a march into town. It was the leader of that group who first mentioned the pet eating rumor. Did you realize that? I don't think I knew that. A tired, century-old smear with a link to tell you just how old and how widely used this particular smear actually was well before Springfield. And so he first mentioned the pet eating rumor in a rant at a city council meeting. Enter then J.D. Vance, who ran with it. The Nazis are reportedly thrilled. Over the weekend, the Proud Boys still exist. You remember them? The Proud Boys held their own march in Springfield. They were invited, I'm sure, right? And the Ku Klux Klan distributed flyers reiterating Vance's complaints. It's just a weird thing. Ku Klux Klan and J.D. Vance appear to have the same platform at the moment. That seems weird. On last Sunday morning's political shows, Vance feigned offense when asked if he feels any regret for the bomb threats and white supremacist antagonizing. He seemed uninterested in why, over and over again, he and his running mate find themselves receiving praise from Nazis and white nationalist groups. Virtually everything Vance, Trump, and the parade of MAGA politicians and influencers have claimed about the Haitian community in Springfield is either provably false or lacks any credible evidence. Most of the accusations are based on third or fourth-hand claims and miscontextualized photos posted on social media sites that have since been proven false. The only evidence Vance himself has cited to support the smear about pet eating are the calls he says have come into his office. A little critical thinking reveals why he's either lying about this or the callers themselves are. And, you know, the man went to Yale Law School. He's supposedly capable of this level of thinking. In fact, let's take Yale out of it because, you know, maybe they're not to blame. He was an excellent student at the Ohio State University, and perhaps they bear some responsibility for this as well. I don't know. But a little critical thinking would have gone a long way here. If your pet is missing, you put up a flyer. You reach out to neighbors, or you call the local shelter. If you have reason to think that your pet was abducted, you call the police. Here's what you don't do. Call your U.S. senator. At the very least, you'd call the police first, right? And Springfield police have repeatedly said they've had no reports of abducted pets. And then parenthetically, there was one call, they say, contra Rich Lowry here. There was one call alleging Haitian immigrants had abducted some geese from a park, and the police found no evidence to corroborate that accusation. But again, not a cat, not a pet, not a first-hand report, nothing. Even the city's Trump-supporting Republican politicians and Ohio's Republican governor have now called out the lies and pleaded with Trump and Vance to end them, to no avail. That's because the first rule of MAGA is to never admit you're wrong, and Vance, who just a few years ago condemned Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric as xenophobic and as a moral disaster, has decided that MAGA is his path to political power, so he has embraced the same ugly provincial chauvinism that he once blamed for helping destroy the community he came from. Remember, that's how he became famous, Hillbilly Elegy. At a rally Friday in Wisconsin, Trump continued to perpetuate the lie that Haitians in the town are, quote, illegal, and promised to, quote, deport them to Venezuela, which, of course, is not where they came from, or him, for that matter. But again, and perhaps another conflation of Springfield and Aurora, he's really falling ill, folks, mentally. Over the weekend, Vance then acknowledged that he'd created a story, but then insisted that truth doesn't matter if your lies get the media talking. The Haitians in Springfield have done nothing wrong. Their only so-called transgression, that's in quotes there, transgression, is to have come from a country whose citizens Trump, Vance, and MAGA have decided are something less than human. A responsible politician, or just a decent human being with some knowledge of the Rust Belt, and Vance, of course, has that knowledge, allegedly, would see this for the potential powder keg it is, dispel the myths, calm the tension, denounce the Nazis, and work to bring the community together. But J.D. Vance abandoned his decency the moment he decided to run for office. As long as there's clout to be gained by lying about the immigrants, he'll keep lying about them, and if that means snuffing out the one trend that's actually breathing some life into the depressed Rust Belt communities that he represents and claims to love, so be it. How does that go? What does he mean by that? Why, he asks next, he answers, why Haitian immigrants settled in Springfield? Were you ever wondering about that? The sole claim, this is now the second half of the article that we really wanted to get to. The sole claim Trump and Vance have made about Springfield that's actually true is that since 2021, about 12 to 15,000 Haitian immigrants have moved to the city. But no one, not the Biden administration, not George Soros, not George Santos for that matter, and not Kamala Harris, sent them there. The reason why so many Haitian immigrants ended up in Springfield lies at a point of convergence between the recent history of Haiti and the recent history of Springfield. After the devastating Haiti earthquake of 2010, the Obama administration allowed displaced people from that country to come to the U.S. under temporary protected status. That's TPS. A policy created during, by the way, the George H.W. Bush administration for refugees from countries in crisis. You know, the whole thing about shining city on a hill and Statue of Liberty welcoming tired, poor, huddled masses, right? Of course, the emphasis for Trump would be on wretched refuse, I guess, probably. But, you know, actually letting people from countries experiencing humanitarian crisis into the United States to find a better life for themselves and contribute to the community that adopts them. Thousands of Haitians took advantage of the opportunity. Donald Trump revoked that status in 2019, infamously calling Haiti one of those, well, you know what, whole countries, the infamous quote from him, from which the U.S. should never accept immigrants. Trump would later add that all Haitian immigrants, quote, probably have AIDS, and that's a link if you want to find that quote, and lament that the U.S. doesn't get more immigrants from better countries like Norway. Trump's TPS revocation threatened the immigration status of tens of thousands of Haitians who came after the earthquake, many of whom by then had children who were U.S. citizens. The Biden administration then reinstated TPS protection in 2021. This is why Trump and Vance blame Biden and Harris for Springfield. They were already there, but they reversed the reversal of their status, you see. At about the same time, Springfield's political leaders were trying to reverse the city's decades-long decline. In the early to mid-20th century, the automobile, farm machinery, and publishing industries made Springfield a thriving hub of culture and commerce. Read any description of Springfield at the time, and you're bound to see references to the grand Victorian homes that lined its streets back then. One local farm equipment baron even commissioned a home designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which is now a local landmark. As is often the case when we hearken back to better days, not everyone benefited from the city's prosperity, he notes parenthetically. Springfield also has an ugly history of lynchings and violent uprisings against its black residents. So I guess here comes another. But like much of the Rust Belt, the manufacturing plants began to close in the 1980s and 1990s, and Springfield atrophied. The ornate Victorian homes that lined the city's main streets fell into disrepair as those with means moved away. The city has lost about 25% of its population since 1970. So in the mid-2010s, city officials embarked on a campaign to lure new businesses to the area, citing Springfield's low cost of living, an ideal geographical position for shipping and manufacturing. The plan worked. Factories started opening up. Other businesses followed. But there was a problem. The population that remained in Springfield and surrounding Clark County was aging. There weren't enough workers to fill the available jobs, so the companies looked to immigrants. Like historically they are always had. Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, Eastern European immigrants, Polish immigrants, Jewish immigrants, but not those other kind, I guess. Well, this happened to be right about the time that Haitians were coming to the U.S. under TPS. Word quickly spread in the Haitian immigrant community that there was a town in Ohio with a low cost of living and lots of well-paying jobs. So that's where they went. Rational economic actors. We could use a couple of those in this country. We could use a rational economic actor in the White House. One might even surmise. And yet, I don't think that's happening anytime soon. Well, the companies did not turn to undocumented immigrants to pay slave wages, as some immigration opponents have claimed. They were documented immigrants with taxpayer ID numbers paid at a market rate. As noted below, by the way, parenthetically, wages have increased in Springfield since the Haitians arrived. Haitians with TPS can live where they like. A large number settled in Springfield because that's where they found jobs. And guess what? When you find a job, you talk to other people in a similar situation who need help and need jobs, and they too take your advice and come and find jobs. It's quite organic. It's actually the way it's supposed to work. This is a recurring pattern with immigration in the U.S. Immigrants settle in geographic clusters close to other immigrants from the same country. This allows them to establish networks, find housing, and open and patronize restaurants and businesses that offer the comforts of home. This is why Paterson, New Jersey has a Little Lima. And in the mid-20th century, Peruvian immigrants settled in the city after taking jobs in area textile mills. It's why Nashville has the country's largest Kurdish community. You wouldn't guess necessarily unless you knew from living there. And Minneapolis has home to a large Somali and Hmong populations. Hmong, I think, is the pronunciation. Terre Haute, Indiana, if I have their pronunciation correct, once had a thriving Syrian population. Lowell, Massachusetts has the country's second largest Cambodian population. Rochester, New York has a large Turkish community. And Russian immigrants settled in places like Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. This is how immigration works. And just recently, we were poring over a map at home. Whose map it was, I cannot recall. But it was a map of the United States color-coded by the most spoken native language in each state, not including English and Spanish. And I think it might even not have included Chinese as well. What would be the second or third most spoken foreign language in each state? And it gives clues to those very same immigration patterns. And if you know anything about those immigration patterns, you probably have a pretty good guess at what the language was. This is simply how immigration works. Haitians in the U.S. under TPS ended up in Springfield because businesses in Springfield offered them well-paying jobs. This is how labor markets work. You don't see any of the Nazis attacking the businesses either, do you? Now, another section here. Haitian immigrants haven't made Springfield a dystopian nightmare. They've made it better. This is the part that Vance and Trump don't want you to have, as referenced by the subheader of the article itself. Springfield is a city of 60,000. As you might imagine, it's had some problems scaling city services to accommodate a surge of 12 to 15,000 new arrivals. As the New York Times reported last year, the city's schools weren't prepared for the surge of new students, both with staffing up teachers and administrators and with hiring translators. The city's health clinic was also overwhelmed, which made it difficult for both immigrants and longtime residents to get care. The influx also created housing problems. A 30% population surge will do that. The newcomers also tend to share housing. 3 or 4 people making good wages will sometimes bunk up in the same home. That has helped drive up rents in the city. Vance and others have taken these very real logistical problems, mixed them up with the very made-up claims about pet eating, crime, and disease, and pushed a narrative that Haitian immigrants are killing a once thriving city. But the main problem with that narrative is that Springfield wasn't thriving, it was dying. In 2012, a Gallup survey named Springfield the unhappiest city in the U.S. Nobody really wants to have that label. Here's the write-up at the time. We'll read it as we exit for our third break. The road south from Toledo is a veritable museum of American industry. This is that write-up of the unhappiest city, right? You pass the rich farm fields and local processing plants, the stately century-old homes in Findlay and Urbana, evidence of the wealth that flowed from the industries that first built automobiles and other vehicles, but many of the homes are badly in need of some paint, and the towns wanting for life, none more so than Springfield, 70 kilometers west of the capital, Columbus. We'll be right back. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got one more segment left here, and although there are many, many things that I want to get to, I still want to read you through the rest of this article. I spent more time on the build-up just because Balco's a good writer and he puts things so well. I don't think it gave you that much more new to understand about Springfield, but the second half of the article, I think, reveals a lot more. It certainly won't be convincing to Trumpers, and probably not even, I don't know, maybe kind of convincing to undecided voters, if there is such a thing at this point and they're worth talking to. But just for your own edification, it just feels like the sort of thing that you might discuss with people. And I suppose even if it doesn't sway undecided voters, it might sway people who just really who aren't going to vote for Trump and probably will vote for Harris. But I don't know. I guess if there's any residual tension that they feel or any residual connection that they feel with the resentment being expressed by, at least by outsiders, about Springfield, if not necessarily the local folks, or maybe they do know someone locally who says, well, I don't go in with the racism, but I do feel the strain that's being put on local resources, or at least that's the sort of argument that sounds like it could make sense to me. The strain on resources is an old one, and sometimes has a seed of truth to it in regards to immigration always. But Balco is giving us some really good points to address some of that here. We were still in the middle, though, of the write-up from the Gallup survey naming Springfield in 2012 the unhappiest city in the U.S., and they went through the recitation of, the century-old stately homes in these suburban settings outside of the major cities in Ohio, where these homes are badly in need of repair, the town's wanting for life, right? And then saying none more so than Springfield. It is here that you see evidence of the full flowering of U.S. manufacturing and its near complete collapse that today has left behind a lost generation and a bitter population that is disproportionately aged, we'll say. In 2015, that's the excerpt from Gallup. Now back to Balco. In 2015, another study concluded that Springfield was the least healthy city in the country. That's kind of rough on these guys. I can understand their resentment of this, but I guess it's describing some kernel of truth. In 2022, Clark County was ranked among the least healthy counties in the state. And last year, yet another survey again put Springfield among the least healthy cities in the state. Between 2015 and 2020, so the Trump years really, Clark County ranked 5th of Ohio's 88 counties in overdose deaths. So again, sort of the subject of the, if not hillbilly part of hillbilly elegy. Certainly the Midwestern, quasi-Appalachian, maybe Rust Belt, opioid problems, all the things that the book and problems that it related that other nearby communities probably also suffered from, all happening here in Springfield. And of course, J.D. Vance, actually given the chance to wield some power, not quite elected power yet, although he is a senator, but campaigning for even more as vice president, in his first opportunity to do something to focus the attention and do something good for the community, brings them bomb threats and mass death threats instead. I think that's pretty remarkable. I mean, earlier on, as he was running for Senate, he was accused of serially starting up charities that were supposed to make things better from a non-governmental, from a non-governmental seat here, but to prove his bona fides. Imagine what I'd be able to do from the U.S. Senate, given that as a private individual, I'm doing absolutely nothing, but look like I'm doing something in the private relief market. And then they rewarded him with a seat in the Senate, and not only did he not do anything, he signed on with the guy who's making things worse, and then took on the project himself of making it so much worse that your kids can't even go to school and you can't go to a local hospital because it's closed thanks to bomb threats. They somewhere along the line decided, of course, that the only way to stop a bad guy eating a goose is a good guy threatening to murder every school-age child in the city. I am not certain how they came to that conclusion, but I can tell you who brought them there. The guy they elected to make things better, J.D. Vance. Anyway, between 2015 and 2020, the Trump years, Clark County ranked 5th of Ohio's 88 counties in overdose deaths. That's over a period in which Ohio itself either led the country or was among the top 5 states in overdose deaths. And wasn't Ivanka supposed to do something about that? Oh, well. And again, this was well before the bulk of Haitian immigrants began arriving in 2021. So you have that problem, not related to their arrival. Vance has also claimed that the Haitians contributed to a surge in poverty and unemployment. And that's not true either. Here below is a chart, the recent unemployment data for Springfield. It's lower now, 4.7%, than it was before the Haitians arrived, when it was 5.0%. I guess there's a spike here, maybe when they're just beginning to arrive and not yet finding jobs, and then they very quickly find them. But actually the spike is probably, now I'm looking at the placement of the spike. Guess what? It's in early to mid 2020, which would be a COVID spike more than anything else, besides which if the great surge in Haitian immigrants began arriving in 2021, that was not attributable to COVID. We were, although we were nowhere near out of the woods with COVID by that point, we were certainly, in Ohio, certainly people were ignoring the whole thing and saying, we demand that we all be allowed to go back to work. And so they did, and Haitians went with them, and the unemployment rate fell, and what's the problem? The poverty rate in Springfield hasn't changed much either way. It was 23% in 2020, and is now 22.7%. So it hasn't changed very much. If anything, it's dropped slightly, the poverty rate. Income has gone up. In 2020, the median annual household income in the city was $39,344. 2 years later, and the last year for which U.S. Census has data, it was $45,113. 39.3 up to 45.1. What did they say? 2 years later? Yeah, not bad. And guess what direction that's going? Immigration opponents also claim that immigrants depress wages. Well, that doesn't appear to be the case. But again, contra Vance, this hasn't happened in Springfield. The mean hourly wage jumped 18% between 2020 and 2023. Dollar figures, $21.33 to $25.16. That's well above the 13% that wages increased nationally over the same period. Vance has claimed the Haitians brought crime to the city. But Springfield has had a high crime rate for decades. Here's a pre-Haitian immigrant graph of violent crime in Springfield compared to Ohio and the rest of the country. I'll have to describe it to you. And the Ohio crime rate here, oh gosh, I don't know if I can make out what the X and Y axes are about. It's certainly, the X axis is by year, starting around 2000 and going up through 2018. And I guess it looks like the median here is supposed to be 339. What is this? The crime rate, 339, doesn't really tell me what this is all about. Maybe violent crimes per 100,000 residents or something like that. The Ohio crime rate lower than the general U.S. crime rate. And that's interesting all by itself. But well above the U.S. rate, the Springfield rate, Ohio's crime rate actually pretty high in the years between about 2003 to 2018. Again, prior to the arrival of the great mass of Haitian immigrants in 2021. As I mentioned, the relative numbers here, Ohio, 339. Not sure what the number represents. The U.S., though, at 463 in the year 2004. Whereas Springfield is at 758. The only point at which Springfield's violent crime rate even approaches the much lower U.S. and Ohio rates, it never falls below the rate for either of them. In 2008, it dips down to about the 500 mark and then spikes back up and stays more or less over the 550 mark as compared to the U.S. rate, which is down in the low to mid 400s, and the Ohio rate in general somewhere now in the 250 to 300 mark. But Springfield has had a problem with it for a long time. Property crime, similar trend. And again, Springfield remaining much higher than both the U.S. and Ohio rates in general. Violent crime in Springfield did spike between 2020 and 2021, as it did in much of the country, while property crime fell. But as Reuters reported after interviewing city and county officials, what didn't happen was any general rise in violent or property crime that corresponds with the arrival of the immigrants. Finally, Vance has claimed that Haitians are spreading disease in Springfield, specifically HIV and tuberculosis. Public health data says this too is false. Clark County has a comparatively low rate of HIV infection, and it had 3 total cases of tuberculosis in 2022. But as with the pet-eating lie, the smear that migrants spread disease is also an old and ugly trope. And more broadly, it's a trope not only unsupported by evidence, the evidence that we do have is actually pretty thoroughly refutes it. Here's a Reddit thread, if you value things like that, from about 9 months ago in which Ohioans discuss Springfield's woes. There's a link here. Just a few of the 126 comments mention Haitian immigrants at all, and only one is critical. Here's another thread from a few months ago in which Springfield residents praised the Haitian immigrants and blamed the city's problems on corrupt and inept political leadership. Haitians have grown Springfield's tax base. Because of TPS, they have Social Security or taxpayer ID numbers, so they pay all the same taxes any other resident pays. Those who have made enough money to buy a home now pay property taxes. Those who don't own a home pay rent, which the landlords then use to pay property taxes. Here's an excerpt from the New York Times profile of the situation a couple weeks ago before Vance's tweet blew this story up. And it reads this way. McGregor Metal, a family-owned business in Springfield that makes parts for cars, trucks, and tractors, was short of workers after investing millions to boost production. The business needed machine operators, forklift drivers, and quality inspectors, said Jamie McGregor, the chief executive. The Haitians were there to fill those positions, he said. The immigrants now comprise about 10% of his workforce. They come to work every day. They don't cause drama. They're on time, he said. Among the Haitians recently on this second shift, which stretched from 1 a.m. to 1 a.m., was Daniel Campere. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the name correctly. C-A-M-P-E-R-E, E-R-E. C-A-M-P, Campere, perhaps. Campere, C-A-M-P-E-R-E. Operating a robotic welder that makes axle components for Toyota trucks. And by the way, how many of you know how to operate a robotic welder that makes anything? Right? That's a skilled employee. Mr. Campere, who arrived in the United States in 2013, for years earned his keep shuttling workers between the tomato fields in Florida and Georgia. Then, some friends who had moved to Springfield urged him to give it a try. Now look, just for some commentary in the middle of this New York Times write-up, massive earthquake destroys everything, what there even was in Haiti, just leaving chaos in its wake. 2010, by 2013, he has decamped for the United States to do what? Try and find a better life for himself. So he lands the first job he can get as close to home as possible, right? He migrates from Haiti to Florida and hears about a job driving workers between the tomato fields in Florida and Georgia. It's the best you could, it's an emergency. Take any job you can. But this is a person who's capable of much more, and then finds himself years later, somebody says, hey, if you move to Springfield, you don't have to work shuttling tomato field workers between Georgia and Florida, working for next to nothing under probably not so great conditions. The workers themselves probably have it even worse. What about if you used your capabilities to absorb training for operating a robotic welding machine at a machine shop in Ohio where they're paying much better wages? Answer, yes, of course, I'll do that. Let's go. Where does he go? Springfield, where the opportunity exists. Why? Because not only opportunity exists there because Springfield and Ohioans invested in creating it, but because other Haitians had gone there, found that it was actually something that was doable, and spoke to people who would believe them. Other Haitians. He started at McGregor in June of 2021 and now makes $19 an hour with a 401k and health insurance. You want to tell me that's not a success story? He's been able to buy a house in Miami, where he originally landed, I guess, that he rents out. In Springfield, he shares a house with 3 other Haitian men who together pay $2,400 in rent. Mr. Campere said that he was aware of the criticism leveled at his community. We can't say anything. The Americans are, French here, whatever that's supposed to mean, using the French words for in their home. I've obviously pronounced that incorrectly. It's not I don't know what it is. I don't speak French. Chez, I understand. Chezeaux. Somebody who speaks some French can tell me how that's pronounced. But okay, we understand. You can't say anything. The Americans are in their home. After a pause, he added, we pay bills and taxes like everybody else. Vicki Stevens, an American worker, overheard the conversation in the break room and shared her 2 cents. I can tell you, Daniel's a real good worker, she said. He works as many hours as he can get. She added, we, the Americans, are just a little jealous of them. Well, okay. Hopefully that didn't explode into hatred later on. Some people probably would go that direction, but thankfully Vicki Stevens so far has not. I hope she's still on the same side here. McGregor's comments, by the way, have triggered harassment and death threats against his company. Oh my God, they said something good about people that was true. And we're busy lying about people who to spread hate. So now we have to threaten, well, we don't care about we just want a good way of life for the white people who already lived here. I don't know. We're making up some kind of garbage. And so, okay, here are some white people who already lived here. Local business owners. Kill those guys because they're giving jobs to the migrants that we hate. And they're not migrants. They've been here for a long time. What's your problem? I don't know. Shut those guys up. They're telling good stories about Haitians. MAGA influencers met this news with the compassion we've come to expect from them, with some accusing him, McGregor, of betraying his race. How so? Doesn't matter. Not true. They just want to say it. The good news is that unless voters give Trump, Vance, and Stephen Miller, thank you, the chance to ruin it all, immigrants are having a similar effect on other struggling communities across the United States. They're breathing new life into blighted neighborhoods in cities like Detroit and Baltimore, as they've always done. But they've been revitalizing smaller cities, towns, and rural areas, too. Here, for example, is what's happening elsewhere in Ohio, in Akron. And this, I guess, a quote from the businessjournaldaily.com. A study, New Americans in Akron, released in 2021 by the New American Economy, found that foreign-born residents contributed $2.1 billion to the economy of the Akron region. The New American Economy is a nonprofit, nonpartisan immigration research and advocacy organization. Last year, that same group found that 4,765 immigrants live in the Pittsburgh metro area, and that immigrants are 26.8% more likely to be entrepreneurs than U.S.-born residents. In the North Hill of Akron, Nepali clothing shops, Asian restaurants, and international markets dot the neighborhood known as Akron's International District. The community benefits, too, said Scott Pifo, I'm guessing at the pronunciation here, Interim Executive Director of Asian Services in Action in Akron. There's a certain energy of somebody who has landed here, he says. The rates of small business formation are really high, partly because that's a thing that they can do, and especially if they were able to create a business that serves their community. The Bhutanese who settled in the North Hill area brought that vitality to the neighborhood. When people started getting settled in North Hill, I noticed the vibe in North Hill changing. For MAGA types, that's death. Vibe is changing. But for most people, it's actually pretty good. And this, before we started having conversations, as this person continues, about what was happening in North Hill, Pifo says, I think a lot of the energy there's a lot of energy that comes of it. Before that, it was a part of the city that people were leaving, he says. There are similar stories throughout the Rust Belt as immigrant arrivals have revitalized places like Austin, Minnesota, Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and Utica and Greenport, New York. The Center for American Progress published a report on this last year, and here's what it found. Among the 2,767 rural places identified in this report, I know, it's in the weeds, the adult population declined 4%, a combination of a 12% decline in the native-born population and a 130% growth among immigrants. Of these places, 1,894, or 68%, saw their population decline between 1990 and 2012 to 16. You'll see the methodological appendix, if you want, for the full explanation. In 78% of the rural places studied that experienced population decline, that decline would have been even more pronounced if not for the growth of the foreign-born population. Without immigrants, the populations in these places would have contracted by 30%, even more staggering than the 24% that they experienced. In the 873 rural places that experienced population growth, more than 1 in 5, or 21%, can attribute the entirety of population growth to immigrants. Immigrants are keeping these communities alive and in some cases reversing their decline. More points from the study. As immigrants and their families move to rural communities in pursuit of economic opportunity, they often bring vitality to these places. Immigrants provide an indispensable workforce to support communities whose local economies rely on industries such as meat processing plants, dairy farms, or fruit and vegetable farms. Immigrants and their families also help local economies in rural communities expand, particularly by opening grocery stores and other businesses that keep their main streets alive and thriving. Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, for example, has prospered with its large population of immigrants who work primarily in the community's large mushroom industry and have opened bustling businesses and restaurants. By helping to stave off population decline, a growing immigrant population in rural areas also helps keep schools open and in some cases even grow school enrollment. Immigrant healthcare professionals such as physicians and specialists provide vital care in rural communities that are generally grappling with a shortage of doctors. In many instances, foreign-trained doctors are the only ones providing care in their area, and even then, many travel long distances to see them. That last point, Balco points out, is extremely important, especially important given that hospitals are vanishing from rural areas, and they're being closed by bomb threats on top of it all. These are the very communities that Vance claims, or once claimed anyway, to care about. They're the communities Trump claims to care about, but it is immigration, not vintage MAGA racism, that's making these parts of America great again. In a recent interview with CNBC, Vance said, if the path to prosperity was flooding your nation with low-wage immigrants, then Springfield, Ohio would be the most prosperous, it says country, but probably county, the most prosperous city in the world. America would be the most prosperous country in the world because Kamala Harris has flooded the country with 25 million illegal aliens. By the way, remember when it was Republican mantra, and really everybody kind of agreed because it was true, that America is the most prosperous country in the world? Apparently it's not now, but they need it to be that for MAGA somehow. As with much of what Vance has said since his abrupt MAGA conversion, almost nothing in that quote is correct. There are nowhere near 25 million undocumented people in the U.S. in total. Kamala Harris doesn't set the Biden administration's immigration policy either, and all the data suggest immigrants have made Springfield more prosperous, not less. About the only thing Vance gets right here is that the United States has typically been the most welcoming country in the world when it comes to foreign workers. But as Philip Bump at the Washington Post points out, for all his faux patriotism, Vance seems to think the United States is no longer the most prosperous country in the world. Well, we are, by a wide margin, and immigrants are a big reason why. Now, I know that MAGA would have you differentiate and say, well, the real issue is that the immigrants, really, that are moving to the Springfield area they're a different color. We didn't like that. But I mean, the whole history, want to make Springfield great again. As they mentioned, that happened most prominently in the following the Industrial Revolution and the industrialization of the area and automobile manufacturing and vehicle and parts manufacturing. And even then, they needed immigrant workers to do that work. It's just that those immigrant workers were Polish or Scots-Irish or, German, way back when, Italian. They were European and looked more or less white, even though at the time, the WASPy folks probably were like, well, these weirdo Italians and Greeks and Polish have odd practices. We don't love them a great deal. They're different from us. They did the same thing to them and, stood in opposition to their mass immigration as well. And now it's Haitians. But it's always been built on all of these new businesses that pop up, whether they were automotive back in the day or whatever the concentration may be now, almost all powered by immigrants. That's just always been true. And we thank Radley Balco for pointing it out in organized and thoughtful fashion. We got just a few seconds, really, before the alarm goes off telling us that it's about time to exit for the day. So goodness. Well, there's so much that I wanted to bring to your attention and haven't been able to do today, but these were important points that I thought it was necessary to get on the record because we're still talking about Springfield. And there's now the looming threat of yet another Charlottesville being brought as a road show, intentionally this time, as part of the campaign platform by Trump and Vance. It's really rather remarkable. I know we keep talking about how Trump gives permission to others to let their racist freak flags fly, but you shouldn't forget that this Trump is giving himself permission to do this more egregiously, more disgustingly, more openly, and as part of a presidential campaign platform, which is really remarkable. And it makes it all the worse that we start with, just to tie it back to our opening subject here, that we've delayed his criminal sentencing until after the election so as not to influence the outcome of the election, an election which he means to run on overtly racist lies, which is really incredible that we would delay the workings of the justice system in order to give him a fair shot at lying his way through a race war. I don't know that was really something we wanted to give him the opportunity to do, but our rules and regulations and our norms were all formed at a time when presidential campaigns did anything they could to avoid such associations. And I guess we just figured, it'll be the same this time around too, or just never gave any thought to why is it that the norm is to put things like this off until after the election so as not to affect the outcome of a campaign. And the answer is, I don't know, but we formed those norms in a day and age when it was absolutely incomprehensible that someone would be running on an openly racist platform. Now, there were times when people ran on openly racist platforms, and that was a normal thing to do, but well before we had the Department of Justice and its current guidelines and regulations about where and when to prosecute political crimes. All right, you get the idea.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, what's next? Of course, it's the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam, who's got a couple of headlines we haven't seen yet today. How about this? A new book, I wonder which one, exposes the lies behind the myth of Trump's business acumen. Well, that's deserving of targeting as well. Plus plus all the news from around the world and around, the country. You know how it goes. Stay tuned.